Why limestone is money. To see why the Ozarks became a magnet, you have to step inside the rock. The plateau isn't a single slab, it's layer-cake geology dominated by Mississippian limestones that time and rain carved into a honeycomb. Engineers love to say room and pillar, but down here it feels like a cathedral built by erosion. Pillars shoulder the ceiling. Corridors run straight for a quarter mile, then curve like a river turned to stone. It's not scenic in the postcard sense. It's useful, relentlessly useful. The first advantage is simple physics. Temperature. Underground settles around 58 degrees. That's not trivia, it's a budget line that disappears. Cold storage operators discovered decades ago that a cave's baseline slashes power draw. Perishable food that demands relentless cooling rides, that natural gradient. Farmer stockpiles sit quietly at target temps without a war against summer. Even paper and film, archivists, learn that limestone walls and constant cool mean fewer dehumidifiers, fewer failures, fewer calls at 2 a.m. Now remember the other heat enemy, servers. Data hates heat, and cooling is half the bill. Put racks under rock and the heat problem bends. You're not dumping megawatts into rooftop chillers that then bake in August. You're working with a mass that wicks heat and a microclimate that starts close to where you need to be. You still design carefully, but your enemy is weaker. Co-location managers who don't brag about locations love this because they can bury the advantage in uptime metrics. Here's where it gets quieter and more serious. Mass and curvature matter when you're thinking about force. Blast waves don't behave like Hollywood sound. They chase paths, reflect, dissipate. A chamber with turns and stone thickness eats pressure compared to a flat field and sheet metal. Nobody promises invulnerability. Engineers don't write poetry, they write attenuation curves. But if you had to choose between drywall and limestone, when the wrong kind of shock travels the wrong kind of air, you know the answer. And then there's the invisible threat people whisper about in contingency memos, electromagnetic pulse. Dense rock isn't a Faraday cage, but it helps by burying and routing cables through predictable, shieldable runs. You can design copper and fiber to duct where skylines can't. When continuity planners talk hardened paths, they draw lines under hills. The Ozarks offer hill after hill with chambers ready to be threaded. None of this works without roads. The Ozark caves that industry favors sit near highways you already know. I-44 carving southwest from St. Louis toward Oklahoma, I-49 angling along the state's western spine, 4-lane feeders crossing cattle country. Drivability sounds like marketing until you're moving perishables or petabytes on wheels. A truck can back into a rock mouth, unload to a concrete dock that never sees a snowdrift, and be gone in 11 minutes. Rail does the same trick with shortline spurs that kiss the limestone, vanish, and reappear as ordinary freight. Springfield Underground is the proof anyone can tour with the right badge. It's miles of paved lanes and lit corridors beneath the city grid. Pallet jacks murmur past rock faces that glimmer with old chisel scars. The addresses down here have sweet numbers like an office park because that's what it is, an office park that never gets rained on. In Kansas City, Subtropolis turned excavated rooms into a metropolis of lease lines, loading times, and contracts that run years into the future. Baseball cards, frozen turkeys, sensitive film, and climate-fussy components live side by side in a constant dusk. What nobody advertises is how those prototypes trained a generation of engineers, lawyers, and financiers in subterranean thinking. Insurance underwriters learned the claim curves on refrigerated losses for cave storage. Facility managers learned how to fight condensation without fighting sanity. County planners learned which blasting schedules buy peace with neighbors. Truckers learned the turn radii that work underground. Every solved headache is a blueprint for the next, larger tenant. Meanwhile, the Karst itself, full of sinkholes, springs, and voids, forces precision. You can't slap a slab on Swiss cheese. Geotechnical surveys get obsessive. Ground-penetrating radar, microgravity mapping, dye tracing in springs. The due diligence looks paranoid until you realize risk runs both ways. You're not just stabilizing a ceiling, you're guarding the aquifer that makes the land valuable. That's why some deals pair warehouse permits with water rights, conservation easements, and wellhead protection plans. It reads like altruism. It behaves like asset protection. And there's a human rhythm to underground life that outsiders don't expect. Sound carries differently, so supervisors speak in lower tones. Diesel echoes, so fleets switch to cleaner rigs that don't choke in closed corridors. Shift change feels like a tide, you sense it in the air more than you see it. Time gets strange without windows. Facility managers build light cycles that mimic morning and afternoon to keep crews sane. These details don't make headlines, they make permanence. Here's where it gets crazy in a quiet way. Once you've proven that commerce can move into caverns, the list of potential tenants expands. Vaccine freezers, seed banks, rare earth component stockpiles, media vaults, and yes, racks of compute that nobody wants on glossy brochures. Add in a security posture that starts with one road in, one road out, and a door you can't crash with a pickup, and you've created something that looks innocent from above and irreplaceable below. So when people say limestone is money, they're not being poetic. They're looking at energy budgets that changed, supply chains that stopped flinching at weather, and risk models that started rewarding rock over skyline. The Ozarks were carved by water into space. Industry filled the space with goods. Others noticed. And in that noticing, the plateau stopped being scenery and became strategy. The corporate vault towns. Here's the hook. These aren't just warehouses, they're neighborhoods with rules. By the time locals started calling it the lower city, the loading docks had already learned the seasons by smell. Coffee beans one week, frozen berries the next, vaccine carriers sliding in by the pallet like briefcases for giants. These weren't caves with tenants, they were neighborhoods under non-disclosure, stitched together by forklifts and fiber. Above ground, you'd pass a beige warehouse and a quiet security gate. Below, an address book read like a cross-section of the economy. Grocers, pharma wholesalers, media archives, and a couple of companies that prefer three-letter initials and a P.O. box. Cold chain made the first play. Food doesn't care about real estate brochures, it cares about steadiness. Down here, the refrigeration load behaves. A trailer backs in, the door seals, and raspberries ride the ambient 58 like they were grown in a fridge. Ice cream doesn't cry in August. Price swings in diesel or weather don't wreck the plan. You can run a just-in-time diet for half a continent if your warehouse never breaks a sweat. Pharma followed, quieter but sharper. Stability windows for drugs don't negotiate, and regulators don't joke. The stone chambers gave them what they wanted, a baseline that turned emergencies into adjustments. Crates with tamper indicators whispered past stacks of IV bags. A logistics manager once said, not for attribution, we sleep better underground. He didn't mean romance, he meant fewer alarms at 4 in the morning. Then came content, the kind that has to outlive format wars and floods. Film stock that hates heat, magnetic tape that sulks in humidity, hard drives that would rather be bored than heroic. Archivists learned to love rock walls and predictable dew points. Studios leased rooms the size of churches and filled them with silence and climate. Insurance underwriters took notes on loss histories and started asking if other clients wanted the same risk curve. They did. With goods came services that looked municipal but answer to payroll. Private fire brigades with rigs cut for narrow tunnels, EMT teams stationed like lifeguards in a sea of stone, and security that doesn't wear badges you can Google. Radios repeat through rock, cameras see in dusk. You don't dial 911, you hit an extension, and a cart appears with a defibrillator before your sentence ends. The elevator pitch writes itself, municipal reliability without municipal noise. NDAs made everything feel like a rumor even when it was. Tenants sign, contractors sign, janitors sign. Airspace stays politely boring, no drone photography for marketing, no sightseeing helicopters, no skydivers dropping Instagram gold. At the county, a tax incentive arrives under logistics resilience, jobs promised, roads improved, training grants dispersed. A reporter calls the PR contact, learns nothing, and writes about commerce. The story lives in euphemism, resilience, efficiency, modernization. But the town knows. Payroll spikes on Thursdays. Gas stations see a line of late-shift tanks at 3 a.m. A diner opens an extra hour because the underground lunch rush is at 9 in the morning for people who started work at 2. Church bulletins add a prayer for those working nights. A kid posts a video of a convoy slipping behind a gate and then deletes it when her uncle asks her to. Micro-stories stitch into folklore. Here's where the doors get interesting. Every complex has rooms that take 2 keys to open. Insurance firms lease racks of safes that don't hold cash. They hold claim histories and models that price storms. Banks back up more than data. They mirror the muscle memory of transactions in case a city blinks. Media companies keep duplicate masters 1,000 miles from the coast without advertising it to fans. The co-location culture, finance, insurance, media discovers that being neighbors underground makes sense in a crisis. If one needs to spin up, the others do too. The two key rooms aren't about drama, they're about alignment. What nobody talks about on record, a second layer of tenancy that piggybacks on the first. A logistics lab fires drills at 3 a.m., testing whether a warehouse can switch to ration distribution without changing the label on the door. A content continuity suite simulates a coastal data center outage and reroutes traffic through racks you can't find on a tour. A health partner leases a windowless clinic with negative pressure rooms and a pharmacy license, then calls it occupational medicine. Words bend, functions don't. Truckers tell the best stories because they see both worlds. One swore he delivered to a dock with 2 doors, same address, different instructions. Door A, pallet goes to the grocery distributor. Door B, same SKU, different scanner, and the trailer temperature is logged like it's a biohazard, though it is. He didn't ask why, he signed and rolled. Another said he followed GPS to a cul-de-sac, and then a shortwave channel told him which ramp to take. He laughed and shrugged. They pay on time. State incentives grease the rails. A governor cuts a ribbon on an e-commerce fulfillment center, touts broadband expansion and workforce training. The grant language includes resilience features, a phrase that covers thicker doors, redundant power, extra water tanks, and a fiber loop that runs twice where once would do. To the public, it's forward-looking commerce. To an engineer, it's a hardened node. To a planner with a continuity memo in a drawer, it's exactly what the doctrine ordered without ever saying the word bunker. Locals adapt to the two realities, the one with PTO and benefits, and the one with clipboards that never meet the sun. Resentment is rare because jobs soothe a lot, but it's there in the stories about a friend who couldn't get hired without a reference from inside. Gatekeeping becomes a literal skill. Who gets the badge that opens the second door? Who learns the color code that changes at the tunnel bend? People start to understand that security isn't just guards. It's access, cascade, and choreography. Corporates built the shell one lease at a time. The rhythm feels normal now, forklifts in dusk, servers that don't sweat, medics on golf carts, auditors with flashlights. But the doctrine that shaped this didn't come from marketing. It has 3 verbs scribbled in a manual nobody quotes: dispersion, duplication, deception. The Caverns made those verbs livable. The tenants made them profitable. And in that profit, the Undercity matured into a town with its own rules, its own calendar, its own weather. The shell is finished enough. The next step needs something only government can command: airspace, comms priority, and the authority to decide which doors open when the sirens sing. Continuity of government's inland triangle. While forklifts mapped the Undercity, a different map sat in binders stamped with quiet authority. It drew a triangle across the country, Appalachians to the east, Denver's Front Range to the west, the Ozarks as the anchor in between. 3 inland highlands far from coasts, cross-braced by highways, rail, and buried lines. The geometry wasn't about symmetry, it was about survivability. Lose one node, 2 remain. Lose a coast, the spine still speaks. From the Ozark corner, you can feel the federal presence without ever seeing a flag. FEMA Region 7 calls this territory routine: Missouri, Kansas, Iowa, Nebraska. But the warehouses that bloom near southern Missouri interchanges don't look routine up close. Cinderblock anonymity, loading bays that never meet weather, and a wind sock above a slab nobody calls a helipad out loud. Inside, pallet labels read like a disaster bingo card: water purification, shelters, medical kits, radio spares. The forklifts move on muscle memory like they've practiced this for years. They have. Hardened communications are the doctrine's bloodstream, and this ridgeline hums with veins nobody points out on tour. Fiber that doesn't hug rights of way where backhoes live. Conduits bored through limestone, looping, diverse, designed so a single cut becomes an inconvenience, not a blackout. Microwave hops you don't notice unless you know which towers to watch at sunset. And on certain ridges, dishes that don't point at popular networks at all, troposcatter links that bounce signals off the lower atmosphere. A Cold War trick revived for a world that learned how to sever cables. Air matters when roads choke. In the midnight hours, a handful of rural strips host tanker drops and touch-and-go drills that never make social media. Fuel trucks roll in after, quiet as contrition, topping tanks nobody admits exist. A county commissioner tells a reporter it's training for wildfire season. The reporter nods. Meanwhile, an avionics tech swaps a transponder on a plane that isn't supposed to loiter here, and the manifest lists equipment, where a less careful form would say repeaters. The triangle runs on 3 words the public never votes on: dispersion, duplication, deception. Don't put all memory in one city. Mirror data, mirror staff roles, mirror functions. Spread them just far enough that a single crisis can't snap the chain, but not so far that minutes become hours. Then keep it quiet, not for drama, but because a target advertised is a target simplified. If a facility wears a bright logo, it's probably Phase 1. Phase 2 lives under a lease with a different name. Doctrine needs roads, and the Ozarks oblige with corridors that pretend to serve only commerce. I-44 ferries freight between St. Louis and Tulsa, touching clusters that read fulfillment on paper and forward staging in practice. I-49 threads north-south, an inland alternative when the river misbehaves or a port sulks under cranes. Shortline rails disappear behind tree lines and re-emerge beside mouths of stone as if they were always meant to. A stretch of county blacktop gets rebuilt to interstate standards to support local industry. Locals joke about potholes that never come back. Trucks glide. Water and fuel blend into the paperwork because that's how you hide a skeleton in muscle. A warehouse permit includes on-site fire suppression large enough to supply a block party of pumpers. A data annex secures reliability with redundant diesel and a day count that doesn't match any utility outage on record. A spring gets folded into a conservation easement with language about habitat. The Land Trust Board gains a member who used to brief continuity councils. Nobody connects it in public. If you want to feel doctrine breathing, talk to the people who run the clocks. A telecom engineer in Springfield says, "We practice reroute windows at 3:07 a.m., never 3:00, so we don't teach the internet our habits." A logistics chief in Joplin runs a tabletop where every 4th truck is lost, on purpose to train for jammed interchanges. A hospital administrator near Branson signs an MOU with a workplace clinic 20 miles away and clocks medevac times at night, not day, because traffic is a liar. What nobody knew at the time, the triangle wasn't just geography, it was choreography. In the Appalachians, a mountain data mirror ticks in a coal hollow. In the Front Range, a command floor practices silent hours where phones become paper. The Ozarks host the glue warehousing, spares, cool stone, and roads that still move when coasts drown. Each node can mutter to the others through links designed to survive both storms and human tantrums. It isn't cinematic, it's dependable. And the deception isn't cloak and dagger, it's camouflage by usefulness. Call a fuel farm peak shaving capacity. Call a ration line a curbside efficiency pilot. Call a muster point seasonal staffing hub. The words are true enough. Their double lives show under stress. Continuity isn't a bunker with a president in it. It's 1,000 mundane rooms that can flip function without changing their signage. Here's the part that makes locals blink when they finally hear it. This was never about picking winners in a disaster. It was about buying time. Time for bridges to cool. Time for ports to untangle. Time for the grid to stop sulking. The triangle buys hours by refusing to be surprised. It disperses attention so no single failure becomes fatal. It duplicates muscle so a snapped tendon doesn't end the race. It deceives chaos long enough to move people and pallets where they have to be. Doctrine wrote the choreography. The Caverns gave it a stage. Now it needed a story the public would accept. Logistics, jobs, modernization. The mirage would do its work until a single pallet taught us how 2 doors can lead to 2 different futures. The logistics mirage, cover stories and corridor games. Want to see a magic trick? Watch a returns dock become a ration line without changing the sign. On paper, it's all e-commerce. Faster delivery, last-mile optimization, seasonal surge capacity. A ribbon gets cut, a governor smiles, and a rendering shows happy forklifts under skylights that don't exist. The cover story is tidy, America shops online, America needs warehouses. What nobody says out loud is that fulfillment covers a lot of sins. When a building's submittals list unusual door ratings, redundant comms, and fuel storage for peak shaving, the euphemism is doing overtime. Everything starts with corridors. Interstates 44 and 49 don't just move boxes, they move excuses. Proximity to customers explains why a facility lands at the I-44-I-49 cross, but from a continuity lens, those lanes also skirt river flood quirks and give you two vectors when one chokes. Shortline rails do the same sleight of hand. An industrial park boasts a rail spur. The spur kisses a rock face, dives through a private portal, and reappears as plain freight. It's legal, it's ordinary, it's also exactly how you'd feed a hardened node without ever saying hardened. Cover stories multiply in permits. A distribution center applies for enhanced fire protection, code for cistern capacity big enough to supply days of operations if hydrants die. A site plan adds stormwater features that happen to double as security moats and replenishment ponds. A telecom attachment cites route diversity and routes the second path through limestone rather than the median strip. Each line item has a public rationale. Collectively, they look like a playbook. Insurers help by accident. Offer a discount for resilience features and watch applicants discover taste for thicker walls, deeper footings, and dual generators with day counts that don't match ordinary outages. Critical refrigeration redundancy reads like a grocery chain caring about ice cream. It doubles as a promise that the node keeps humming when the zip code blinks. Underwriters love lower loss ratios. Continuity planners love how underwriting moves budgets they don't control. Then there are the truckers' tales, the folk history of the mirage. One driver swears his dispatch sent him to a coordinate, not an address. He rolled past a dead-end sign, found a gate that looked like it guarded a field, and a voice on UHF told him which ramp to take. Another laughs about a dock with two scanners. The green light printed a grocery bill of lading. The amber light printed a manifest with the consignee scrubbed to a trust name. He's not paid to ask why, so he doesn't. He knows his trailer temp is logged with a seriousness that outstrips lettuce. Intermodal chess gets creative. A cluster along I-44 markets itself as a reverse logistics hub, returns, refurbish, recirculate. Meanwhile, the site's geometry lets you flip to outbound ration packs with trivial changes. A crossdock along I-49 has seasonal capacity that strangely aligns with hurricane calendars, not Christmas. Brokers whisper about blackout windows where slots vanish because a retailer drill takes the board. No one's lying. They're just not telling the second story. Fuel and water hide in the margins. A permit for backup generation lists tank volumes with decimals that suggest more than code minimum. A neighboring parcel gets a quiet variance for bulk liquids and looks like an ag supplier until you notice the depth of the pad and the security lights tuned for long, even coverage. Water rights stack through easements that sound like stewardship and behave like sovereignty. Exclusive draw allowances tied to conservation language and monitored by a consultant whose resume includes federal acronyms you don't see on county paperwork. Microwave and fiber play peekaboo. A utility map shows one carrier. A Leon filing hints at dark capacity reserved under separate LLC. Tower applications cite broadband improvement, but the antenna angles don't serve neighborhoods. They bridge ridge to ridge, building a private spine the public can't see. At 3 a.m., latency wobbles in a coastal metro and a test light comes on in a limestone room. Nobody outside notices. Inside, the drill log gets another green check. Workforce programs complete the disguise. Grants fund advanced logistics training, RF scanners, cold chain protocols, incident response. To a sheriff, that's safer trucking. To a planner, it's a labor pool that can pivot to emergency distribution without teaching from scratch. The hiring language filters for background checks and badge discipline. Applicants think security theater. Managers think gate integrity. Local politics adds its own layer. Commissioners want jobs, residents want quiet. Developers promise both and mostly deliver. In exchange, they get road upgrades to industrial specs, turning radii generous enough for panic maneuvers and signal timing that favors heavy rigs at odd hours. The mirage thickens because everyone benefits until priorities collide. A neighborhood loses water pressure during a heat wave. A rumor says an industrial user filled tanks. The utility blames a break. Maybe they're both right. Here's where the cover slips briefly. A state press release celebrates an e-commerce facility's Resilience Award. The bullet points list exactly what a bunker would want: dual utility feeds, islandable microgrid, on-site medical, redundant comms, perimeter hardening. The word bunker never appears. Commenters cheer efficiency. A planner somewhere exhales. A checklist just got funded without a fight. The corridors don't just move freight, they move stories that keep people calm. If you can call a ration route a returns lane, you protect the lane from panic. If you can call a muster yard a surge lot, you protect the yard from crowds. If you can call a priority conv perishable rescue, you give troopers a script that clears intersections without lighting up scanners. The mirage is mercy as much as misdirection. Follow one palette long enough and you see the game. Labels that change function without changing code, docks that pivot with a keystroke, corridors that stay open because their purpose never sounds dramatic. The cover stories aren't lies, they're shields. And behind them, a country rehearses a kind of survival it hopes never to admit it needs. One palette, two doors, a micro-investigation. If a single palette could talk, what would it confess? We started with a palette that behaved like it knew a secret.